In this show, we're going to be discussing a little bit about business initiatives, databases, and data warehouses, and also looking at decision support, analytics, and artificial intelligence. So let's get on with it. The goals, outcomes, and objectives for this particular module include present practical ways to integrate technology resources and technology-based methods into everyday practices in health and human services environments, recognize the World Wide Web as a communication network, a repository for information, and a social and learning environment. The objectives include explicate practices which can positively influence supervisory performance, discuss and provide examples of how the World Wide Web serves as a communication network, a repository for information in a social and learning environment, describe guidelines for electronic communications, and demonstrate and discuss practical ways to integrate technology resources and technology-based methods into everyday management and educational practices. Enterprise resource planning characteristics. There are different characteristics for different target markets. Some of the enterprise resource planning software systems include SAP, which caters to large business, Oracle and PeopleSoft, also targeting large businesses. And then some of the ERP systems such as Microsoft or Great Plains, small to medium businesses. So depending on what size company or corporation, you might be looking at different types of ERP systems. Most ERPs include customer relationship management, financial management, human resource management, supply chain management. These are common features of most enterprise resource planning programs. In this slide, you'll see a video, the impact of information technology on healthcare. And this is the CEO of Oracle. Oracle is a major player in the enterprise resource planning markets. In this slide, I've placed a link to a video which features Larry Ellison, CEO of Oracle. And Mr. Ellison is talking about the impact of information technology on healthcare in the video. And it's a very short 4-minute video, but I think it's very enlightening. Oracle is a major player in the enterprise resource planning market. Implementing an enterprise resource planning system, or ERP, requires significant organizational and technical considerations. As there will be changes, and these changes affect stakeholders who have varying perspectives and interests in the system. In healthcare systems, this is especially the case as the units who are responsible for delivering services are accustomed to functioning autonomously. And if you doubt that, try to boss around a group of physicians. They're very used to being autonomous entities. And so there are a lot of different considerations when you're implementing an ERP system, including technical considerations. And again, many of these changes are going to affect the stakeholders. I've posted the article, Understanding ERP Systems Implementation in a Hospital by Analyzing Stakeholders, by Boonstra and Govers, up in our course website, and it's under the section for Module 2. And this figure illustrates the model which they write about in their paper. This model is informed by processual, interpretive, and integrationist models of change. These models emphasize that various groups of people and organizations may interpret information systems differently, and that these interpretations may influence their actions and affect the implementation and development of the ERP systems within the organization. So in the implementation process, we need to consider the stakeholders, their power, their urgency, their legitimacy, meanings, interests, problems they may face. We need to think about outcomes and solutions, the ERP content, and the context of healthcare. So the implementation process has to all be done within the context of healthcare. The purpose of the paper is to develop a theoretically based model to analyze how stakeholder attitudes and behaviors in a hospital setting affect the outcome of ERP implementation. ERP implementation is no small task, as this system is going to interact with and provide reports and useful information from a number of major components of the organization. It's also not a small undertaking in terms of the costs involved, both in time, effort, as well as resources, particularly financial resources. These are not inexpensive undertakings. So it's important to understand your stakeholders when you're implementing one of these systems. In their paper, they talk about the perception of some of the stakeholders that the implementation is a management thing. And because management happened to fail, they were forced to save the hospital. So that was the perception of at least one of the groups in their findings. So even after implementation, the head of the medical staff believed that their involvement would have remained minimal had management done their job correctly. And when we look at an ERP system and see all the different aspects of the organization that will be involved, financials, manufacturing, supply chain management, data warehousing, different types of processes, projects, human resources, we look at all these different characteristics, and you can see that it's, again, no small undertaking as we try to look across the institution and have one system that will be able to access data and information from all these areas and make it much more useful for the organization. So you can see why people want to implement these types of systems. Some of the different benchmarks in ERP implementation. This chart here, this pie chart, if you will, shows a comparison of some of the major players: SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft. And you can see that SAP is roughly 22%, Oracle comprises 15% of the market, and a much smaller amount by Microsoft at 10%. Another paper that I've posted in Module 2 for your reading pleasure is by Cash and others, and it's entitled, "Is There an App for That? Electronic Health Records in a New Environment of Conflict Prevention and Resolution." And the authors framed their paper introducing that the Obama administration, as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, provided this stimulus bill. The government provided $19.2 billion for encouraging the adoption of information technologies, in particular this money targeted around electronic health records. And the use of electronic health records results in, among its positive things, allows information to be shared between physicians and patients and across multiple entities so that your health record becomes truly something that can be portable and follow you around, so to speak. But it also results in conflicts, problems, and disputes, and it definitely transforms the doctor-patient relationship. That relationship starts to move into a truly shared responsibility. So new technologies provided in an electronic health record enhance patient empowerment. And I can speak just briefly, personally, to this transformation of the doctor-patient relationship. Some of the health care that I've experienced now, physicians have implemented some aspects of the electronic health record where I can log in from a website and see my lab values long before, in the past, I would have to wait for someone to call and provide these test results. So it is very empowering, and you don't have to call up and ask for information or try to remember information if you didn't get it written down. You can truly start to see, visit by visit over time, how your lab values have changed. So it is very empowering as you start to see things over a longer trend. So you can become a lot more of an active participant in your health care because you have that information that typically you would not have had ready access to. You would have had to call the office or ask to see certain lab reports. And that's just one example. Also in their article, they proposed the adoption of online dispute resolution systems to help prevent and address problems that may arise in the context of electronic health records. There are problems related to the amendment of digital records as well, as other eyes now are on the record, and there's going to be problems when we want to amend those digital records. In the discussion area of our course, I've posted a question for your participation. So the discussion activity provide examples of how the World Wide Web serves as a communication network, and I would like you to provide 2 examples of each of these: a repository for information and a social and learning environment. I'll try to include examples related to education or management, and then finally review and critique posts by your colleagues. So this will generate hopefully good discussion among yourselves and also allow you to benefit from examples posted by others. There's lots of examples out there, so there should be no trouble finding 2 examples of a communication network or repository of information in a social and learning environment. We'll discuss just briefly social media, and I'm fairly certain that most of us in the class are active participants in social media. But it's a collection of web-based and mobile technologies, and these technologies, this collection of technologies, create true interactivity among users. Users can both create and consume content that exists in social media. It is, by that description, a Web 2.0 technology, not the kind of Web 1 technology where you largely can request content, view content, but there's not too much interactivity. In this case, users both create and consume content. And one good example of social media is Facebook. We can certainly log on to Facebook and see our friends, see what they're up to, check their statuses, note that they, yes, once again, brushed their teeth this morning. I am just joking. There's some very meaningful content posts up there, but there's also some day-to-day stuff that one wonders why someone woke up with the need to express that on this given day. But it's a great way to keep in touch with people and to share information. And in that example that I just gave, you can see that users not only read content, but they also post their own content up there and make it available to their networks and groups of friends. In social networking, we post information about yourself and join an online society, a network of friends. Facebook is a huge player in this. Facebook has more than 70 million users, according to Facebook. Half of those users log on to the site on a daily basis, and the average user has about 150 friends. So think to yourself, as you think about management opportunities and business opportunities, think about marketing opportunities and educational recruiting. And if you are on Facebook these days, you'll start to see that there's a lot more advertising going on. And I know we talk about educational recruiting. Many institutions are posting information and have different networks associated with their college or university, trying to get people involved virtually. Also available online, many of the social activities that we do from day to day also have their presence in the World Wide Web and online environments. Social activities such as shopping. There are sites where you can, shopping's also always been kind of a social experience for a lot of people, and you can post what you've purchased, let others know where you're shopping, where deals are, and even reviews of products. Game playing is also a popular online activity. Massively multiplayer online role-playing games such as Second Life, where you create an avatar and the avatar you can purchase clothing and sunglasses, and I've even seen demonstrations where someone's purchased a jetpack and can fly around in these virtual worlds, and you can interact with other players in a sort of Second Life, if you will. Other game-playing activities such as World of Warcraft are also largely popular role-playing types of games. Education has always been a social activity, and it's also available online, hence this course. But taking that to a very large extreme, there are some massively open online courses that are out there starting to make their presence known. These are very, very large groups of courses where many of them are even offered for free, and you can find by searching online, and you can take a course with just thousands of other people. Also available through the magic of GPS, social locationing, where you can find businesses, venues, and also locate your friends using the GPS in mobile devices. And one example of this that's pretty popular is Foursquare. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about databases and data warehouses. And this becomes a very important topic, as databases and data warehouses support the analytics-driven organizations that base their decisions on data and facts. And more, that's nearly every institution, it seems. And starting off here, we talk about iTunes. iTunes was launched in 2001. And prior to iTunes, if you walked into Best Buy, many people bought their music on, at one time, and I'll show a little of my age, I suppose, but cassette tapes, moving over to eventually CDs. So they bought it in some sort of physical format. iTunes revolutionized the way that we purchased and listened to music. And today, physical music format is far less than digital formats, where you simply log on to iTunes or another type of site and download the music you want onto a portable player or your phone. Other examples of this related to education, the library. At one time, I was a big fan, still am a big fan of audiobooks. Listen to them pretty much every week. At one time they were available on cassette tape, and then that moved to CD. And you can still get books on cassette tape and CD at the library, but you can also now get downloads directly online from the library, so you don't really have to make a physical visit to the library. Mahoning County has an app that you can install on a phone, and you can access audiobooks without ever actually physically walking into the library. You do need your library barcode, which still comes on the back of a library card. Think about the impact that these changes have had, technology changes have had on newspapers. And I'm not sure how many of you actually get a physical newspaper delivered anymore or stop and purchase one, but many of us certainly browse and view that information online. Same thing has happened with the photo industry. Film and developing and printing photos still exists, but it's pretty much been replaced for the average user by digital photos. And you can share those easily across networks using things like PhotoBucket or Dropbox. When we look at business intelligence, we're talking about collective information. And this can be information about your customers, competitors, business partners, competitive environments, as well as your own internal environment and operations that give you the ability to make effective, important, and often strategic business decisions. Analytics is the fact-based decision making. Analytics focuses on the integrated use of technology tools and statistical techniques to create real-time, high-quality, fact-based business intelligence to support decision making. So these are not emotional type of decisions, although one might get emotional after looking at some of the data, but trying to make intelligent decisions based on real-time, high-quality, fact-based intelligence. When we talk about relational databases, a database is a collection of information, and many of you have used databases, I'm sure, in your work, organized and accessed according to a logical structure of that information. In a relational databases use a series of logically related two-dimensional tables or files to store information in the form of a database. One of the things that are important in formulating and deriving a database is how it's organized, and the data dictionary contains the logical structure of the information for the database. And when we're looking at how databases are organized, the primary key is an important concept, and this is a field or a group of fields that uniquely identify a record within the system. And one example of a primary key in the database systems used at YSU would be the banner ID number. And this is a number that uniquely identifies each student's record. You'll be familiar with that concept. So when we're making these decisions, we go through various phases of decision making. We use intelligence to find what it is that we might wish to fix. Then we design phase, we find fixes for those problems. And we might then go back to the intelligence phase. Or we might proceed on to choice, pick a fix. So we might have more than one fix that we've determined and need to make a choice and pick one of those and then implement that fix and then go back towards the intelligence phase. So find what to fix, design different ways to achieve that fix, make a choice, implement, and repeat. This figure depicts the system development life cycle. And there are 7 steps to this life cycle, and the first one of those, logically enough, is planning. In planning, we define the system to be developed, set the scope of the project, and develop the project plan. And this would include tasks, resources, and time frames to get the project up and running. In the analysis phase, information about the business has to be gathered so that we know the requirements for the system. And once having that information, we can then begin to design the system, which is phase 3, designing the technical architecture required to support the system, and designing the different models that will be used. Having that, we can proceed to develop the system, phase 4, development. In the development phase, we build the technical architecture and build the database and the programs associated with the system. Once that's all completed, we can then move on to test it. So in phase 5, the testing phase, write test conditions and then perform the testing of the system. Provided that testing works out well for us, we'll move on to step 6 and implement the system. So in the implementation phase, this involves writing detailed user documentation so that people know how to use the system and can refer back to that documentation, and then, very importantly, providing training for the system users. It doesn't do a whole lot of good, even if you have a really great system. If the users don't know how to use it, it's not going to accomplish much for the organization. So sometimes it appears that implementation of these systems doesn't put enough emphasis on training for the system users. Likewise, in step 7 here, or phase 7 rather, the maintenance phase, building a help desk or tech desk to support the users is important. There are going to be questions, issues that need to be resolved, and having that support readily available will enhance the system. Providing an environment to support system changes is also important. The system is not a static thing, and the organization's needs will likely change, so you need to have some sort of an environment in place to support system changes as they become necessary.